We move on to Yael Shalom Zedak, who's a PhD candidate in psychoanalysis and hermeneutics, Bar-Ilan University. She also works at AMCHA, which, for those of you who are unaware, is an Israeli organization that was set up to give counseling and support for Holocaust survivors and their families. So, Yael.
Hi, everyone. The name of my lecture is Between Language and Silence. In his book, Beyond Guilt and Atonement, Jean-Marie writes, those who were tortured will never feel at home in the world. Faith in the world will never return. For Amiri, his inability to feel at home in a world betrayed him permits his use of language as well. While in the concentration camp, he tries to find some comfort in the last lines of a poem he loved, but nothing. I was listening to the sounds of the words, he writes. Try to feel the rhythm, the spiritual configuration, nothing. The poem no longer went beyond reality. It just stood there, and the capo yelling left, and the soup is thin. But the collapse of the comforting effect of language in face of trauma is not limited to poetry. The traumatic event also collapses the ability of language to describe feelings and emotions, as Emery writes. The pain was what it was. Beyond that, there's nothing to say. Further to these words of Emery, you can say that there is a double, even triple collapse of the language. The collapse of the poetic language and also the collapse of the emotional language. But these two forms of language also drag with them the day-to-day language that loses its connection to reality. We left the camp, Amory continues, naked, contemptible, emptied, confused. And a long time passed until we relearned even the mere everyday language of freedom. End of quote. One can say, therefore, that when man is deprived of his basic freedom, not only his faith in the world fails, but also fails his faith in the language that's supposed to represent that world. The word, milah, dies in every place in which reality demands absolute rule, Amory concludes. For us, it died long ago, and we are left not even with the feeling that we should be sorry over its fading. The betrayal of words in face of trauma can explain part of the silence of the Holocaust survivors. In this context, Amir Gutfreund writes in his book, Our Holocaust. At home, life was ordinary, but under the surface, an enchanted tapestry of forbidden and allowed. The questions you don't ask mom, the questions you don't ask dad, and the questions you ask and there are no answers. Where were you, mom, in the world? Like dad in the ghetto? How did you walk barefoot in the snow? Mom, why do you hate ants? You don't ask. The constant hesitation between silence and speech, between the imperative live to tell and the inability to do so, positions us, therapists, in a state of confusion. What to ask, when to be silent, what to bury, what to revive, what serves life and what serves death. This confusion increases given the inability to know. Is the difficulty to utter the trauma rooted in choice or coercion, in repression or concealment, in a lack of words or lack of sufficient words? But whether it is untellable, unsayable, unspeakable, or unhearable, the connection between trauma and language as Ginsberg writes is always the negative "an," whether willingly or unwillingly. Given this confusion, in the intersection between words and trauma, I would like to suggest that the mental truth is not in words, not silence, but rather in between them, as Feldman and Lab describe in the book Testimony. As one who is caught simultaneously between two contradictory desires to speak and not to speak, I'm left only with the option to stutter. Of this mental stuttering, as if unable to decide whether to speak or remain silent, Yael Naaman writes in a book, Hayo Hayta. Pazit, the heroine of the story, as only child of Holocaust survivor, is portrayed as a woman full of contradiction. On the one hand, lonely, wishes to die. On the other hand, thinks about the future and wishes to be loved. Pazit's two-way mental movement is also reflected through the way she uses language. That is why, quote, she erased from her books all the notes she had written in them, went over them on both sides of the page so that you couldn't see anything, not even against the light, Naaman described. As opposed to the erasure movement, Pazit didn't stop writing. She would write on everything, on the packs of Nelson she smoked, and she always struggled to recount exactly where she wrote what, because all the cigarette packs looked alike. The writing on the untraceable cigarette packs reflects the conflicting movement in Pazit's psyche. On the one hand, she doesn't stop writing. On the other hand, she cannot or doesn't wish to find what she has written. But for Pazit, writing was not only a means of expression or consolation, but also a way to calm herself. She would sit until 2 in the morning and for hours simply copy from an encyclopedia. It would calm her. The copying of words from encyclopedia entries, which was done after psychiatric hospitalizations, shows Pazit's concrete metonymic use of words. It shows her ability to separate the language from its symbolic and metaphorical meaning and turn it into pill, consumed in time of distress. The writing offset by erasure demonstrates Pazit's ambivalent position toward language, a concept quivering between life and death, between sanity and insanity, between writing and erasing, between present and absence, reflects how the psyche is facing the trauma, a trauma which cannot be spoken about, but also cannot remain silent. The refusal to choose a side, to become fixed in a safe place that feels like home, reflects what the Holocaust took from the survivors and their children. In this sense, the stable stance in face of the world that betrayed them and their silent promise to their self and to the world that they will never, ever feel at home in it, explains their dual attitude towards language. Language that enables the voice to be heard, but which directs towards a world that refused to listen. And we, as therapists who treat survivors and their children, who understand the stuttering, who witness to the writing that becomes erasing, to a poem that is crushing to reality, we will not join in the stuttering that annihilates the soul. We'll face it with an apprehensive yet stable voice. We will pick a side. We will choose life. Thank you.